Abyssal Murmurs. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next horror stories. Story 1, Sis-Kwaje/Don't Cry. Hello. I would like to tell you guys a true, sad, and heartbreaking story that my mother told me. Back in Laos, it was 1984. My mother already had 2 daughters, my older sisters. She then gave birth to her 3-odd child, my brother. I will not give his name out for respectful reasons. He was very handsome, my parents said. White skin, red lips, and thick midnight hair. He was healthy, happy, and everything seemed perfect. But about a year into his short-lived life, he got really sick. My parents said he was almost walking at almost 1-year-old. He got sick so fast and quick, he soon passed. It seems like it was too much for them to go into details. My parents remembered he was still as beautiful as if he was still alive. My mom said her heart cried for the heavens and earth. Her tears burned her eyes. Her body was numb and weak. She said her world shattered seeing her child in the custom-hung outfit laying there lifeless. My father and her family refused to let her cry to the dead/my brother. According to Hmong customs, it's an omen to cry and cling unto a deceased young human being, so my mom said she cried silently in her heart. They quickly did the Hmong custom funeral for my brother and buried him. He was buried in a deserted forest off the daily trail my parents and many villagers took to the garden. After burying him, she missed him every day, every hour, and every second. She would go visit him a few times a week by herself. She would go and pull out weeds around his grave and clean his grave/home a bit. My father started noticing that she was visiting more often. He and her side of the family encouraged her that it was not a good idea, and that a young human who has passed so short after death is nothing but evil after death, for their spirit hasn't been accepted into the family tree spiritually. My mother insisted she would stop visiting my brother so often. This is the scary and very sad part. One day, my mother decided since the garden was caught up. She said his grave was surrounded by tall trees. His grave was in a little meadow-type field. The trees surrounded him like a circle barrier, but far off in the distance. There was about 24-inch bush/tree not far from my brother's grave. As my mom approached my brother's grave, she was overcome with emotions, and she started crying. She cried her heart out and hoped the heavens heard and felt her pain. She said she must have cried for about 20 minutes when all of a sudden, in the distance by the little bush tree, she heard a little bird, almost like a human voice. It said Sis-Kwajos. Sis-Kwaja/Don't cry, don't cry. My mother raised her head up and looked around, but saw no one. She said her hair on her neck and arms stood right up. She said her tears still ran down her cheeks. The little voice from the distance near the little bush resurfaced. Sis-Kwajos/Don't cry, don't cry. My mom answered back a few words. I won't cry anymore, my son. This will be my last visit. I'm sorry I come and cry for you every day. I miss you. You stayed with me for such a short amount of time that my heart isn't healing from your birth up till your death. I will not come anymore. Don't cry and wait for me anymore. I will miss you forever. And with that, my mom got up and whipped her tears and took one look at my brother's grave and proceeded to head back on the main trail home. She said as she started walking away from the grave, the little bird voice started chirping like it was crying. She didn't want to look back because she didn't want to see what was watching her leave for the last time. She said the chirping was still going on until she reached the trail, and she still heard it in the distance. She said her heart ached with pain because she knew that was the final goodbye. Whoever was there after that visit was not going to be my brother anymore. She reached the village, where she ran into my dad's arms and cried. She finally calmed down and told him the story. He forbid her to go near that site anymore. He said her spirit is weak and vulnerable to the unseen. My dad told her it was not her son anymore in that grave. He was on the other side. What was roaming the place were the evil spirits who couldn't find its way. My mom said she found the courage to pick up her heart and cover her pain and never went back there. My parents soon came to the US and had a few more kids. My mom still dreams of my brother and her walking the trail. In her dream, she would see him looking about 1-2 years old, walking around naked in the forest or siding on a log up ahead on the trail, waiting for her. She's frightened by the dreams, but she still has a soft spot for my brother. I can see her pain when she talks about him. There is nothing stronger than a mother and the love for her child, even in death. Story 2. Haunted College. I went to a tiny college in a small town. The college is pretty isolated from the town itself. It's also surrounded with trails and small patches of forests. This happened when I was a first year in college. My cousin, who is a year younger than me, decided to come visit me. She was interested in my school and wanted to come tour and do an overnight stay. She came during my finals week, which wasn't ideal, but it fit her schedule. She got a tour of my school, and I showed her some of my favorite spots on campus. I told her that since it was finals season, I had to get some studying done. I usually only study in the library because I get distracted very easily, so I told her I was going to the library. My cousin didn't want to stay with my roommate, and she had homework to do as well, so we packed our bags and headed for the library. I felt bad for her, so I bought a bunch of snacks and drinks from the campus convenience store, and we went to the library. When we got to the library, my favorite study spots were occupied. If you're a college student, you know that there's always that one spot you like to study in. Luckily, our library is huge. We found a study space in the top floor of the library. It was around 11 p.m., so even with the big windows, it was pretty dim. The entire section of our area was empty, except for the two of us. I usually studied on the main floor, where there was a lot more people whenever I studied late in the libraries, because I'm a very paranoid person, but I wasn't scared because my cousin was with me. I sat at the table, and she sat on the couch. At first, we were loud and chatty, so we didn't feel the ominous atmosphere, but we eventually quieted down and focused on our work. I could hear noises, but it wasn't like the library was completely empty, so I didn't think much of it. Around 1 a.m., my cousin had finished all the snacks and drinks I bought her and needed to use the bathroom. It was straight down the long hallway, but she wanted me to go with her. It wasn't weird to me because girls always go to the bathroom together, so we went. Most parts of the library have sensor lights, so if an area doesn't detect movement for about 30 minutes, it turns off. However, these lights are very sensitive in my experience. As long as I fidgeted in my seat, the sensor will detect me and not turn off. My cousin and I were being obnoxious in the bathroom because she needed to poop, and I was making fun of her. After being poop shy for 5 minutes, she gave up and we headed out. All the lights were turned off. We were the only ones left on the floor because the lights in the other sections turned off except for ours. When we walked to the bathroom, we triggered all the lights, but when we came out, the only lights on were the hallway lights. I felt a shiver down my spine. "Do they turn off the lights at 1 a.m.?" she asked. "I don't know. I've only been on the main floor. I've studied until the library closed before, and this never happened." I answered, "Well, when does the library close?" She asked. 3 a.m., I responded, "but I'm not sure. Maybe they turn off the lights around 1 a.m. on the other floors since it's not the main floor," I tried to explain. However, I've never studied on this floor to confirm that theory. My cousin just nodded, and we proceeded to our study spot. Luckily, the lights turned back on as we walked and triggered them. I kept studying, and my cousin started to pack up. "Let me know when you're ready. I'm done studying," she said. She played on her phone while I kept studying. We sat in silence for about 40 minutes until we heard a library cart being pushed around. I shot a look at my cousin. I looked around and our lights were the only ones on. "Okay, there has to be something wrong with these lights," I thought to myself. I tried to continue studying. The cart was being pushed closer and closer to us. I picked up my laptop and sat next to her. As soon as I did, the cart stopped. Fuck. Did whatever it was see me? Suddenly, the big double doors to enter the library creaked open. These double doors led to the main stairs that would be taken down to the main floor. Did whatever it was leave? I didn't know whether to feel relieved or scared. I quietly packed up my stuff. "Let's go," I whispered. My cousin and I walked toward the door. We were about 20 feet away from the door when we saw the door being slowly pushed open. I looked at my cousin, and she pulled me behind a bookshelf. The door opened a fourth of the way and quickly slammed shut. I swear, Kavpu plagued my spirit in that moment, and I couldn't even scream. My cousin was scared too, but she's a rising shaman, so it's safe to assume she wasn't as terrified as I was. I think whatever was there could sense how scared I was and began messing with us. The door started opening and closing. It wasn't like in the scary movies where it dramatically opened and closed. The doors have the big horizontal push bars, and you have to push those bars in order to get out. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, that bar was being pushed, and the door would open ever so slightly and close again. Then we heard footsteps slowly walking up and down the main aisle. Up and down. Stop. Up and down. And stop again. Then we heard running around the entire floor. It sounded like whatever they were taunting us, running up and down the aisles. I started to tear up because I was so scared. This continued for about 5 minutes. At this point, I was pissed off. It was 2 a.m. I was just scared shitless, and I was tired. My cousin took out a red triangle pouch and handed it to me. If you're shaman, your parents have probably pinned there to your pillow or hang it near your bed. She left our hiding spot and walked straight toward the door, leaving me behind. As soon as she walked, I read behind her and noticed the door immediately stopped moving. She pushed the door and we walked out. I've never walked down the stairs that fast in my entire life. As we were walking to my dorm, my cousin pulled my arm and said, "Let's not take that way." "Why?" "It's shorter. I just want to go to bed," I said. "Trust me," she said. I trusted her, so we walked a different route. When we got to my room, we didn't even shower. We went to go brush our teeth together and sleep. Before we slept, my cousin told me to hang the red triangle pouch on my door handle. At night, I had a dream about a girl. She was a white girl, dressed in a white nightgown. She looked humanly with pale skin. She didn't look scary, but she felt scary. In my dream, she was knocking on my door, but I didn't recognize her, so I didn't let her in. I know you're in there. Open the door. I need your help, she whispered. I sat on my bed, and the knocking continued. Go away, I yelled. I laid on my bed and turned my head toward the window and saw a horrible image of the girl. Her face was swollen, gray, burned, and bloody. Her tongue stuck out, and her hair was raggedy. She was furious, breathing heavily. She looked through my window and launched right toward me. That's when I woke in a cold sweat.
I started to cry.
It was already 9 a.m. and my roommate was gone. She worked at 8 a.m. on Saturdays. Luckily, my cousin was sleeping on the floor and woke up to the sound of my scream. I explained my dream to her. She told me about the incident that we encountered the night before. Your school is haunted as fuck, she said. Well, no shit. She told me that I had a weak spirit. I get scared easily, which makes me an easy target, but I was especially vulnerable because my spirit was extra weak. It was probably due to the stress of college and finals and the lack of eating and sleeping. She told me that she felt like something was off when we found our study spot, but she thought maybe it was a Friday, and a lot of people didn't want to study that night. When she asked to go to the bathroom, she didn't want to leave me alone. That's why she told me to go with. That was very nice of her, lol. Then she asked me something that spooked me even more. Do you guys store cadavers here? Yes. Not frequently, but I think they got new cadavers for finals. For those who don't know, cadavers are dead bodies that are donated for medical practices. We have a lot of pre-med students who work with cadavers. Remember when I told you to take another route last night? Well, I wanted to avoid the building that stored them. I could feel them there. Don't walk there anymore. Fuck. It was the building right next to the library. I didn't even know and have walked past that building so many nights. I don't think the dream was for you. She asked for help. I know they're there. I think she was trying to get to me, but I was protected, so she came to you. She couldn't get through the door because of the pouch. That's why she went to your window. I'm gonna need a pouch for my window too, was all I could say to her. She also told me she felt other ghostly presences around me because I was so weak. They wanted to weaken my spirit and possess me. Good thing I didn't take off my red strings. I was curious about the encounter in the library, so I searched it up. There was a whole thread of students talking about their experience in the library, specifically on that floor. No wonder nobody was studying up there. I don't know exactly what happened to cause the paranormal activity, but everyone talked about the library cart noise. Apparently, a librarian had a heart attack while on the job, and her ghost still haunts the library. Needless to say, I transferred out of there after my first year because I just couldn't handle walking around campus at night after that. Story 3. 119 Creekside, Sir, Sacramento, C. a 95,823. When my husband and I first got married, I had moved in with him and his family into their 2-story house in a gated community. Of course, as a NIAB and a wife, and being pregnant at the time, I was always home cleaning and making sure I had lunch ready for my husband and his family before they got home from work and school. That being said, I was always home alone in that house. It was just something about that house that always gave me the chills even when I first walked into that house. A month or two passed, and I was constantly getting slept on, but I didn't really care much about it because even before I got married to my husband, I was always getting slept on regardless. Do note, I never once did go out or ever got the chance to be out overnight. I was young and had young parents, so they were always so strict on me. Anyways, back to what I was saying. One day, my husband and his family came home from work/school. We decided to take a nap in the room, but left our door wide open while we took a nap. In case any of you are wondering, we had 4 bedrooms and 3 baths. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs and 1 downstairs. The master bedroom, of course, was upstairs, which all the brothers shared. One was my husband and mine. Then the other was his sister's. The room downstairs, one was his parents'. I woke up to feeling something touching my thighs. I was thinking it was just my husband, of course, but I woke up only to realize I was getting slept on by something. I have always gotten sleep on growing up, since we had a lot of bad spirits wandering around us because my grandpa was a shaman, so I assumed it was because of that. That's why I always got slept on, so I usually fight it to get off me or cruise at it in Hmong, or even try to open my eyes. I tried to fight it to get off me. When I heard something so loud in my ears, just running up the stairs and into my room, that time I had my arms around my husband as well too, and I started feeling something just touching my fingers and my hands. I was so scared I tried to break free from getting slept on. I called my husband's name, but of course, they wouldn't hear you. I felt that was pointless to do. All of a sudden, it got off me, and I quickly woke up my husband and told him. My second experiences was when my husband and I were sleeping this one night. I had woken up in the middle of the night to turn to look at my husband. He was facing the other way while I was facing to the wall. Then I turned back around to sleep again. Not 5 minutes into sleeping, half awake and half asleep, I heard something whisper in my ears to look up at the window and take off that red thing. I don't really remember what it said, but these were all I remember if what I heard. I was thinking it was my husband who said that, so I turned back to facing him and was going to reply back to him when I noticed he was still sleeping in the same position. That's when I realized it was a girl's voice. It was a girl ghost who was saying that to me. It was above my husband's bed, just hanging. I got so scared. I just fell back asleep, being scared about it. I told my husband the next day, and he thought it was so weird I experienced that. My third experience was when my husband and I was on the phone when he was at work. We would sometime just stay on the phone, even if we aren't talking to each other. I was always scared to be in the house alone for some reason, so I was always on the phone with him while he was working. He always brought his headphones with him to work too, so he could hear me when I'm asking him something, or just talking to him and answer me when no one wasn't around him. One day, I fell asleep in the room while I had my husband on speaker, so I could hear him when he talked to me. When I was all asleep, I heard 3 knocks at my bedroom door. I thought maybe my mother-in-law had come home from work that day, so I was going to get up and open the door for her. But when I realized it, I was getting slept on again. I could hear my husband still on the phone working and talking to his coworker. In my head, I was thinking, why did the knock stop? Usually my mother-in-law would call out for me if she was knocking and I didn't go open for her. But this time, it was just silent after those 3 knocks. I thought to myself, while I was still getting slept on, I have to get up and try to fight it off me so I could go see what my mother-in-law wanted. All of a sudden, it got off me, and I quickly got up and was going to open my bedroom door when it finally hit me that what if it wasn't her who was knocking? What if it was something else? How come she didn't call out for me after she knocked on my bedroom door? I was so confused, yet my heart dropped at the same time. I was scared. I just backed away from the door and ran back to my bed. I hung up my phone and called my husband back over and over again until he picked up, but there was no answer. So I texted him of what happened. Scared. I stay in my room until my husband was off work and everyone came home. My fourth experience was when I was sitting on my bed just doing my homework. I was in homeschooling at the time and eating chips at the same time. When I finished eating, I went to the bathroom. We had our own bathroom that was also connected to his sister's room as well, to wash my hands and use the bathroom real quick. When I heard pages flipping from my bedroom, the pages were flipping as if someone was flipping the pages in my book. But I thought maybe it was just the wind blowing into my room, so I didn't pay much attention to it until when I went back to the room a few seconds later. I realized the window wasn't even open. That day was not windy at all. Of course, I didn't want to freak myself out, so I just brushed it off like nothing. The fifth experience was after a few months already passed. Probably after I already had my son too. My husband's sister's daughter was sleeping downstairs in my in-laws' room. I got up to go check on her, then went back up to my room to take care of my son. I left my door a bit open too in case she woke up. A few minutes after I left back up to my room, I heard running upstairs, assuming it was the niece. Then it ran into the brother's room, the master bedroom, and slammed the door so loud. I shouted her name out loud, but she didn't come out of the room or even answer back. I got up and went to open the brother's room and kept calling her name, thinking she was hiding from me. So I began to look under the beds, in the closet, in the bathroom, everywhere in the room, and on the balcony too. She was nowhere to be found, so I left the brother's room and walked back down the stairs. Before I was even on the last step of the stairs going downstairs, I leaned over the railing stairs and pushed my in-laws' doors open to see if she was still sleeping in there. At this point, MYHEARTDROPPED. Right when I saw her still laying on the bed in my in-laws' room, my eyes just opened up so wide. My heart was pounding so fast. I was scared as shit. I was thinking to myself that I left the brother's door open too, and my room's next to it. If I ran back upstairs and ran past the room, what if I saw something just standing by the door staring at me? My heart was racing, but I didn't care. My son was in the room, so I ran as fast as I could up the stairs, not even turning my head to look into the brother's room at all. I slammed my door and locked it. I was so scared. I messaged my sister-in-law to see when she'd be home and that I couldn't stand being in this house myself anymore because I was so scared I could shit in my own pants literally. Never been so scared in my entire life. I felt I lost my spirit that day. The brother's room was right next to the stairs. My room was in the middle. Then the sister's room was to the left, but both the brother's and sister's rooms were facing each other. My room being in between of theirs was facing to the stairs railing. Of course, I always told my husband my scary experiences, but he just always thought I was just being crazy and hearing things. I'm sure he didn't think that really, but he was just saying it because he didn't want to scare himself. So many other scary things happened in that house. I could write a book about it. There were days when I would have these bad vibes when cooking before my husband and in-laws got home. I always had that feeling like someone was watching me or standing in the other room. My husband's niece would say she saw this girl in a white dress at the end of her bed or at the corner of the bedroom, just staring at her when she was sleeping. One time my sister-in-law told me she saw this girl's hands just sticking out holding the doorknob and had red nails. My husband would say I was just hearing things until one time he was home alone for a weekend. He was using the bathroom in our room. He closed both doors, our bedroom door and bathroom door, just using his phone when he heard someone knocking at our bedroom door. He stopped what he was doing to listen to it carefully. The knocking began for another few seconds, then it stopped. He got out the bathroom and opened the door and started yelling out, cursing at it to get out. It was not welcome here, and all that its stuff. It couldn't have been anybody because everyone was out camping the whole weekend and wasn't going to come back until Sunday at noon. A few months later, we moved out, and someone new came to live in there. My in-laws told us that they went to go talk to the people who moved in there, and they told my in-laws that their son slept in the same room my husband and I used to sleep in. He had been experiencing scary things too. All I know is that I'm glad we moved out. When I think back to it, it scares me even more because I couldn't believe I was always home alone with that thing. How did I even make it out alive? All I know is that I'm very glad we got out. It is a true definition of a haunted house, especially when it was a Hong family who lived there before my husband's family moved in there. Not to mention, I remember my in-laws would tell me that when they first moved in there, they found clothes and pots and pans left inside the house still, which my in-laws threw out. The owner even came back to ask them how was living in the house. They asked if anything weird was going on, which my in-laws told them no, but really things were happening in that house. It was just never good to talk about it inside the house. That is it. I have few more experiences that had happened there, but they are just little experiences. I still wonder what happened at that house. When they first moved in, there was yellow tape still hanging from the wooden fence. But that will be unknown of what happened there before my husband and his family went to move in there. That won't be my part to tell anymore. Story 4, Valley High Apartments. This was one of my stories that my husband and I had encountered back in the year of 2008, where we first lived at the Valley High Apartments by Mack Road, right behind Food Source Shopping Center. It was during the time when my husband and I had our first child. Moving on, about a month after I had my first child, my mother-in-law was staying with us at that time to care and look after me. Everything was fine and living normal as usual. We lived in a one-bedroom and one-bathroom apartment, so there are only 2 windows, which was in the bedroom and by the sliding door, which went out to the patio area. As a month passed by, my mother-in-law went back to her hometown in Minnesota, which left just us 3, my husband, our daughter, and me. First night came around, and it was about close to midnight. I remembered my husband woke up, slightly lifted his head up, and looked toward the closed bedroom door, and slowly but fast enough to pull the sheet over his head. As he was doing so, I was awoken by it, and I kind of pulled the sheet off his head, asking him what was wrong. He just whispered lowly that he'd tell me tomorrow. I just left it at that. The next morning came around and about noon. I'd finally remembered and asked him what caused him to act the way he did last night. He told me that he saw a lady in a white gown with long black hair just standing in between the corner angle where the wall and bedroom door were connected, just watching us sleep. I got a little bit of a chill running down my spine just hearing him tell me, so I said he better stop joking around and for him to tell me if it was not real. He said he was not lying. It really was what he saw, but we just left it at that and went on about our days just pretending to act like it was just a bad nightmare. The second night came along. We were already asleep, so about maybe 2 or 3 a.m. into the middle of the night, my husband woke up to use the restroom. After he was done, he came back, and as he closed the door, he heard some noises coming from the kitchen, which sounded like someone was digging dishes or searching for something. My husband totally got freaked out and hurried himself into bed and never mentioned anything of what has happened, not even to me because he knew I would be scared. going on a few nights that had passed by with nothing until one night. I was taking a shower while my husband was watching our daughter. As I was taking a shower, I hadn't even started with shampoo just yet. I heard someone humming right from inside the bathroom. But of course, I left the bathroom door open. I peeked my head out and looked around, but it went dead silent. Nothing. Not a single noise. So I went on with my showering and got out. After I got out, my husband said he going to jump into the shower as well, and did just that. It was about 9 p.m., and I was getting my daughter's bottle ready for bed. As I was doing so, my husband called out from the bathroom and said, "Babe, why are you humming that stupid song?" I didn't really catch what he was saying, so I asked, "What did you say?" As he got out, got dressed, and came into the living room where I was at and repeated, I said, "Why were you humming that stupid song?" I was stunned, shocked, scared, goosebumps all over my arms, chills running down my back, all of the above, as I replied back, so I wasn't the only one hearing it. "You heard it too?" We just stared at each other and said nothing more and headed to bed. The next day came. We went to my parents' place and mentioned all that was happening and events of the things that had been happening. We told my parents we were probably going to move in with them for the time being until we could find another place, because we no longer had the intention of living there any longer. My parents didn't said much but agreed, and so we didn't say anything to the landlord besides just letting the landlord/manager know that we'll be moving out by the end of the week. My parents came and helped up pack our things, which surprisingly, we didn't have much stuff except for the necessary things, so it didn't take long. We were finished packing in 3 days. As the years passed by, I started my first job and worked for quite a few months. I told one of my co-workers about it, and he mentioned that those apartments were haunted because a lot of people had died there or were killed. That was when I knew something probably happened in the unit we lived in, which we will never be going back to. Before anyone lives at a place, just remember to ask around. I'm sure people know or hear of the history about the haunted areas. Well, that's the end of my story of what had happened or what my husband we had encountered. Hope you guys enjoyed my story, and be safe, everyone. Story 5, Dragon Tales. This isn't a ghost story. I find this strange rather than scary. I bought this rope, eelfish, and that day I bought this fish. It was sunny out but began to storm. The thunder roared loudly. Soon after, strange things began to happen, but I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was my roommate playing pranks on me, but I never bothered asking him. I have my 55-gallon tank set in my room across from my dresser. My fish tank never leaked, but soon after I bought this fish, I'd wake up and find my carpet wet. I thought my tank was leaking, so I checked it, but it was fine. There was no leak, so I ignored it. Then my roommate began complaining about our living room carpet being wet, but we never bothered to check where it was coming from. I began having nightmares of a girl crawling out of my fish tank and then disappearing. Then I'll just lay there and wait for it to reappear and crawl back into the fish tank. When I wake up, my carpet would be wet wherever the girl in my dream crawled to. I thought nothing of it, as I'm not superstitious. One day, I came home from work and found my fish on the floor. I quickly picked it up and put it in my tank. I thought to myself, how did the fish get out here? I always have my fish tank securely closed tight. Maybe it was Nick, my roommate, playing a prank on me again. But how? My door is always locked when I'm not home, because I know Nick likes to play pranks on me a lot. Plus, I get home from work before Nick does. That day, when Nick got home, I asked him if he was been playing pranks on me, and he looked confused and said, "No." "What are you talking about?" Then I told him, and he said maybe it just somehow jumped out. We left it at that. A couple days ago, before I left to work, I fed my fishes. The rope eel was still in the tank. I made sure to check if my tank was closed tightly. When I came home from work that day, I didn't see the rope eel. I thought it was hiding, so I didn't try looking for it. 2 days passed, and I noticed that I haven't seen my rope eel. I started searching the tank for it. I lifted all the things in the tank, but it was nowhere to be found. I took out all my fishes, and to my surprise, my rope eel was gone. I was pissed, but I eventually got over it. I also stopped having nightmares of the girl. Yesterday, I dropped something under my dresser and bent down to pick it up, and guess what was under my dresser? Yeah, my rope eel. It got me thinking HOWTHEFDID, a Y, a CROSSM, YROMUNDARMDUIDERASAER. My fish tank is a LW, a YS securely closed tight. And when I keep finding the rope eel out of the tank, my tank is still closed tightly. So how the fuck did it get out? I don't know, but that's just fucking weird. The day before I found it, I had a dream of the girl crawling out of the fish tank, but it never crawled back in the fish tank. Like I said before, I was pissed that my cool fish died, but on the bright side, I don't wake up to a wet floor anymore. Story 6. Niab, sister-in-law. One night, my brother called and told me to go over quickly. My Niab, sister-in-law, wasn't breathing. When I got there, the ambulance had already taken her away. When we got to the hospital, the doctor came and told us the sad news. My Niab, sister-in-law, had stopped breathing and passed on the ride to the hospital. They tried their best, but couldn't save her. We were all shocked and in disbelief. She was fine yesterday. I personally talked to her just a few days ago.
This was so tragic and sudden.
A couple of weeks after her funeral, my brother called to ask if I could go hang out with him and keep him company. I went that evening and took my younger sister, who was 14. We stayed up, reminiscing of my Niab, sister-in-law. We cried and laughed.
I could tell he hadn't been able to sleep.
He had bags underneath his eyes and grew out his mustache and hair. He'd always been a clean-cut kind of guy. I felt so sad seeing my brother this way. Finally, around 2 in the morning, he was so tired he finally went to bed. My sister and I fell asleep on the couch in the living room. They only had one couch. It was a long couch, so we slept opposite of each other where I could touch her feet and she could touch mine. We shared a medium-sized fleece blanket. At about 4 a.m., I woke up to a cold breeze. I noticed my sister pulled the blanket more toward her as we were sharing it. Then I heard a faint wailing, like someone was crying. The couch we were sleeping on was facing the TV, and behind the couch was the dining area, and next to it was the kitchen. Both areas were only about 10 feet away from me, as it was only a small one-bedroom apartment. I stayed silent to listen, as I thought maybe I was just imagining it. Then again, I heard the sound of faint crying from behind me. It's as though it was coming from where the kitchen was. I heard the cry slowly coming closer and closer. As it came closer, it was getting louder and louder. I got so scared. I grabbed the blanket off my sister and shook her foot to try to wake her. Of course, she didn't nudge since we stayed up so late. I could feel the hair on the back of my head slowly raising. I was so scared because at that moment, all I could think of was my Nayab sister-in-law. I shook my sister's foot again. This time she kicked me and asked, "What is it?" I whispered and told her what I heard, and it scared her too. We both got up so fast to turn on all the lights and the TV and stayed up till the sunrise. At about 5:45, we could see light through the window curtains. I went to check on my brother, and he was still sound asleep. Since the sun was up, we had the courage to leave. My sister and I left him a note and told him we love him. We never told anyone about what happened. My sister still believes I might have just imagined things since my Nayab sister-in-law's death was still so fresh. I don't think it was my imagination. I truly think it was my Nayab sister-in-law crying. Story 7. This was a story I found online, but I lived at the house where it happened. I was about 8 years old when this happened. I lived in this house in Massachusetts, and we didn't know it was haunted. We lived literally beside a forest, where there was wild animals and hunting. The downstairs neighbor told us that they normally see ghosts, and to not go into the forest. One night when it was windy, we were still up when the lights flickered, and the doors were opening and closing, but that was shortly after the windstorm. After a week living there, we heard screams from the forest at night. I would run there and check. One day I heard a scream and ran into the forest to check it, and I got lost. When they found me, I was crying, and there was blood all over me. They asked me what happened, and I said I saw people screaming and crying. Shortly a month after everyone went to play outside, and my mom was playing top spin with us when we were playing, we looked at the forest and saw a bloody figure near a moose. I said, "Mom, that's the lady that scared me." Our dog kept barking at me every night, and I would cry because I would see a lady in my closet. When school was over, we moved to Alaska, and the ghost had followed us until we went to see a shaman. 10 years after I went back to the forest in Massachusetts and spent the night there, and the next morning I was in the forest. I got scared because I knew something dragged me to the same spot where I got lost, and I had some blood on me. I left quickly and never returned. Story 8. I used to live in a small town called Atwater, CA. My family of 10 siblings, along with my parents, moved into a small 3-bedroom and 1/2 bathroom house. For the first several years, family life went well. Not much drama and etc. But eventually, after all of the elder siblings moved out, the house started to change. Extensive and upheated arguments went on with my parents and between siblings. I started witnessing paranormal activities. The girls' room became the coldest spot of the house. Every night, as you step outside at the front door, a black cat with glowing eyes would sit on the lawn and stare at the front door, not moving. I started to have nightmares of a girl in white and long black hair always wanting to kidnap me or take me away to play with her. At the time, I was about 9-10 years old. I'm now 20. I remember waking up around 2:30 a.m. My 2 brothers and I shared the same room at the time. I slept in my twin bed, and my 2 brothers slept in their queen-size bed. My brothers were deep asleep. I woke up to Native American noises / chanting loudly. I thought maybe it was just me going crazy or hearing the wind, so I decided to close my eyes and turned over to my side to sleep. I then started to hear a tapping noise coming from under my mattress. My bed rail was made of metal, so you can tap on it. I woke up and thought maybe my ear was just messing with me, so I decided to turn to my other side. As I closed my eyes, The tapping under my bed got louder. I thought to myself, this can't be happening. My heart started beating super fast. I felt cold sweat. I turned over, facing up, opened my eyes, and a big, black, dark figure about 6'f tall was standing by my bedside. I immediately took off, threw my blankets down on the floor, and ran to my parents' room. I woke my dad up and told him what happened, but he thought I was just having a nightmare. So, he let me sleep between him and my mom for the night. Other incidents had occurred as well, but it'll be a long-ass story, so yeah. But every time something ghostly/paranormal happens, I seem to be the only one ever witnessing such stuff. Now, my family and I are not shamans. We're Catholics and go to church. But how do you explain such occurrences? Story 9. Just a little background. I've been able to communicate with spirits since I was 14. I'm now 26. Through the years, I've been able to see, hear, and talk to them. I know things that I shouldn't know, and sometimes am able to know things before it happens. I am Christian and feel like this is a gift from God. There are at least 3 people in my immediate family that has different abilities. I work as a CNA/medtech in Alzheimer's units in nursing homes. I have MANY stories under my belt that I usually use for campfire talks. This is just one. Comment. Or, like if you'd like to hear any more. If you don't believe or care, that's your business. You can skip past this story as much as your little heart desires. Well, there was a certain room at the back of the unit that was demonically possessed. Most of the caregivers could feel an evil presence in the room as soon as we'd go in there. One day, we decided to be ghost hunters and used the negative shots on our cameras to record the room. We all stood behind and watched the camera. While recording, we could see a dark shadow creep across to the left of the screen, attempting to duck down under the camera, but we were able to still record the thing. Every resident that ever slept in the room, when we'd go check on them, they'd have their sheets pulled up over their heads. You know, like little kids do when they get scared. Even residents that lived in a different room prior to moving into the demonic room, they didn't have a habit of pulling the sheets over their heads until they'd move into that room. My residents would hold their heads telling me, "There's a young guy in there that keeps hitting my head with a pan." So I'd pray for angels to come protect them. One night, as soon as I was in REM sleep, I had a vision that I was standing inside the room looking up at the ceiling. Instead of the ceiling, it was a sheet of glass with gray water running all across it. Through the water, I could see a young white guy trying to swim through it towards me, but being under the glass protected me. He looked really nice, but looked like he was from the early 1900s with hair combed to the side, a white button-up shirt tucked in, brown suspenders, and brown pants. Since there was a barrier between us, I took it as a sign that it was something negative. I told it to leave me alone, and the vision stopped. As soon as I closed my eyes, I was back in the room again with the same sheet of glass with gray water and the same man. Water usually means turmoil when you see it. The following day, I refused to go back into the room and explained my vision to my girls. I could feel that whatever was in there wanted something from me. I went to help a resident that had just moved out of the demonic room get ready for bed and into her PJs. I took her in her room and shut the main door to the hallway, but left the bathroom door open since she had a private room. As I'm on my knees, the resident and I heard a loud bang, and the door started closing in on us. We both screamed, and she asked me, "Oh my, what was that?" I opened the door slowly until the door was opened so wide. It hit the far wall, but no one was in the room. The hall door was shut just as I had left it. I checked everywhere, and all the other Kanas had been busy helping other residents get ready for bed. When we got back out to the hallway, my girl and I asked the resident, "Honey, how does the young man that hits you in the head look like?" She turned to me and said, "He has dark hair combed to the side and is wearing a white shirt, suspenders, and brown pants." My girl and I just looked at each other and mouthed, "OMG, that's the same guy I saw the night before." Whatever was in the demonic room was really pissed at me for not going back in there that day. I think it was trying to deceive me by looking nice so I'd go in there, but my gut instinct kept telling me not to go in there. The day after, I had to go back into the room to help my girl with the resident that lived in the room at the time. As I reached up in the closet to grab her nightgown, I heard a woman singing. No one was in the room but the three of us. So, me and my girl took the resident to the bathroom to help her get dressed. Background. This resident rarely ever talked or said anything besides hi. When we were helping her, I had shut the bathroom door but continued to hear a woman on the other side of the door still singing. So I asked the resident, "Honey, does anything ever bother you in this room?" She turned to me with a real strange look and said, "Like what?" "Like a ghost." The resident looked serious as ever and stated, "Yeah, he wants human beings." Needless to say, we got her up in her wheelchair and ran out of that room with her. I have way more stories about this room and will share more if you'll want to hear more. Story 10, Weawiga. Hi, everyone. This is my personal experience fishing for white bass at Weawiga. I decided to go white bass fishing by myself. I went to the store and bought some supplies. Left to the fishing spot around 4:30 p.m. Got there around 5 p.m. I saw a few hung guys there too, and a few mechas with their boats. So I talked with them and we decided to all wait until the night, just to see if the fish will bite better. As we are fished till sundown, around 8:30, the sun started to set. The other hung guys left because the fish weren't biting. As soon as they left, bam, I set the hook, pulled in a big size white bass, knowing that it was a little late in the spring white bass run. I was happy with just one big one, so I kept on fishing and fishing, telling myself that they are starting to bite. I fished and fished in the night. The bugs came out. They were starting to bug and annoy me. I went on my phone and started to listen to some hung songs. I sang along softly. I lost track of time, fishing and listening to music. The fish wasn't biting at all. Then an old hum guy came up and asked me, "Hey son, are the fish biting hard tonight?" I replied, "Not really." He asked me where I was from. I told him from different town. Then he told me, "Go home. Too many bugs, and the fish isn't even biting. Come back tomorrow. There are a lot of people that come in the morning that have better luck than you do." I asked, "Where you're from?" He said, "From around here." I thought to myself, man, this guy taking me as a fool to get my spot and catch all the fishes. Whatever. Fish aren't biting anyways. He then said, "Yeah, son, come back tomorrow. It's late. Too many bugs. Fish not biting hard. Tomorrow morning, or in the morning, you will have better luck, okay?" I replied, "Okay." As I packed my stuff up and lit up a smoke, I told the old man good luck. Walking to my car as I noticed there was no other cars in the parking lot. There were 2 cars by the bar, but those were the workers. As I glanced around, my car was the only one in the lot. I looked back to where I was sitting at. and the old man wasn't there. No other cars except for mine. Chills shot down my spine. My hair on the back of my neck stood up as I looked into the darkness. I threw my stuff into my car and drove off. About 5 minutes later, my car started to act all funny. The dash lights were dimming. My headlights were pulsing. My check engine light flashed on, and my M-Fay gauge cluster went whack, jumping from 2100 back and forth. The more I gassed the car, the more the lights would dim. The pulsing headlights pulsed faster and faster. The MP gauge dropped to 0 and jumped up to 100. My car sounded like I jumped my timing. Misfiring. Softly, I drove into a local gas station. I checked my CAL codes and found out it was just a blown fuse. With relief, I looked at the gas station, but they were closed. I couldn't drive my car back home like that. It was too big of a risk for me. As I stood there, thinking to myself, how am I going to get home? A local man asked me if I needed help. I told him I blew a fuse, and if he has an extra one. Lucky me, he owns a local car shop down the road. He gave me the size I need, and I popped it in, thanked him for it, and I drove home again. While I was driving back, I remembered that the old Hmong guy didn't want me to fish there by myself, and wanted me to come back in the mornings.
I told myself that he was just looking out for me.
And without him telling me to go home at that time, I would have never met the local that helped me out. I don't know what would have happened or what was gonna happen. Thanks to that old man, I avoided something bad that was gonna happen. I am very thankful for him helping me out. I thought he just wanted my fishing spot. The morale of this experience is to pay more attention to what's going on around you. Don't let greed blind you and know when to call it quits. Thank old man. I owe you one. Don't know what would have happened to me that night, but you helped me out big time. Thanks for looking out. Story 11. I saw her too. I remembered years ago, my husband and I moved into our first apartment. During that time, we were struggling to make ends meet, and we had 2 children. The oldest was 7 years old and the youngest was 4, both girls. The place looked a bit run down and ghetto, but that was all we can afford. Everything was fine for the first week, but it was the second week that things started to happen. My 2 daughters sleeps in one room together, but lately, the youngest one hasn't been wanting to. She would tell us that at night she sees monster ties. My husband and I were confused because my mother is still alive. When we asked her where does she sees her, she answered, monster ties is in the closet. If you guys remember, those older homes has those sliding doors for the closet. My youngest will never let it open at night, even a crack. Nothing really happened after that, but one night my 2 kids started screaming and crying. My husband and I ran to see what happened, and all they both said was monster, while pointing at the closest. Ever since then, they both sleep in our room, and we use that room for storage. No matter how many times we close the closet, the next day it'll be fully open. There would be nights where I'm by myself with the kids, and it's late at night. We would hear the sound of the closet slowly slide open. I would always tell my husband for us to move out, but he would shrug it off that it's nothing. It's just an old apartment, so there would be noise. The last straw was when we were alone at night again, and we all 3 suddenly heard the closet door slammed open. My youngest started to cry, and I ran into my room to grab my keys and belongings. I took the kids and slept at my parents' house that night. We eventually moved out, and I finally asked my husband if he never experienced anything too. He finally told me he did. He said, I saw her too. That very same night, when both of the girls cried and we went to sleep. I had a dream, and it was pitch dark. I walked past the kids' bedroom, and the door was wide opened. I turned to look inside, and I can see the closet wide open. First, I heard a low giggled, and suddenly I saw her. She was an old lady, sitting inside the closet. She stood up and said for us to get out. I woke up so scared. I hear it all the time when I went into the kids' room to grab something. The door would always sound as if someone was sliding it open, but when I looked, it was pitched close. My husband said that's why he changed to working graveyard shift. He knew they couldn't afford to move out, but he thought that since I didn't experience anything, I would be fine being alone. I was so mad at him for that. Story 12. My boyfriend and I were not getting along so well, and there was no explanation to why and how things changed in my mind. The only fact that may have caused this is because he works at a tow yard, and most of the items he brings home are from vehicles that were involved in accidents. This is how it starts. One day, he brought home a jade bead bracelet, in which case, I thought to myself, how beautiful when he placed on my wrist and stated this should bring you good luck. And I, in response, asked, what did you do? Where did you get it from? Bear in mind, my boyfriend is an honest person. He simply replied, I found it in one of the cars today, and that was that. Every day, I wore that bracelet, and yes, it has brought a lot of luck to me. A higher pay with little hours. But it also caused friction between us. He felt as though I loved that bracelet more, that life itself, and I felt as though that's not true. But I just couldn't stop admiring it. As the days went by, I started noticing items in the house being moved to areas where I didn't like. I confronted my boyfriend and he denies it. Shrugs it off as if I was just looking for an argument. So the friction grew until one night he was called in to tow a vehicle around 2 a.m. This is where it ends. While he was gone, I couldn't sleep. So I walked downstairs to get a cup of warm milk. As I made my way into the kitchen, I had all the lights on from the bedroom to the upstairs hallway, down the steps, into the living, and now the kitchen. The moment I turned the light on, my bedroom light went off. I thought to myself, that's odd, but continued toward the refrigerator to get the milk. Once the fridge opened, the upstairs hallway light went off. I thought to myself, must be the electrical fixture. I'll have it looked at tomorrow. But when I grabbed the milk, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise and a cold draft from behind. Then and there, I realized I was not alone. I heard a soft-spoken voice. He belongs to me, not you. In that split moment, I forced myself to turn around and saw what I wished I'd never seen. A Chinese bride, draped in red and gold with a veil and long golden nails. She had a servant holding her dress and giggling. Through my fear, I was able to utter, "Why? Why would you want him?" Then suddenly, I felt my jade bracelet fall from my wrist and heard the jade beads hit the ground, spreading everywhere. That was when I knew it belonged to her, and what he took was a trade for him. This lasted for what seemed like an eternity, as if I stood frozen in time to watch my future fall apart and remembering every detail about it. Once the bracelet had fallen, I looked up to see a smirk behind that veil, as she, what looked like floated, walked right through the kitchen side window, and before leaving with her little servant still giggling, she turned, and all I could see was her lips moving but not hearing anything. I didn't know what else to do but sit in the kitchen sobbing, shaking, and hoping my boyfriend was okay. He was. The moment he arrived home, I told him of what had happened, and he just laughed, saying he didn't know I missed him that much, and walked off into bed. The next day, I contacted my father, who told me to give the bracelet back to my boyfriend, to give it to the rightful owner after being lectured, so I did. My boyfriend was upset at first, until he found out from work that the parents of a young girl who was engaged at the time of her death came looking for her bracelet, the one her fiancé had given to her as promise to be with her forever. Since that day, my boyfriend won't take anything from work in fear that next time it might be him, and things have gotten better, even if I did lose my job a few weeks later. Story 13. Am I pretty? I found this story off Tumblr. Don't hate. It's a Korean story, so that's why the names are like that. There once was a mother who had a cute 5-year-old daughter named Ji-yeon. Ji-yeon had an interesting habit of constantly asking her mother if she was pretty. And although the mother grew weary of the same question, she answered her daughter with a reply of course, honey, you're pretty. One day, the mother and Ji-yeon went on a walk by the bridge near the river. Ji-yeon, while staring into the river, asked yet the same question, Mommy, am I pretty? The mother was so fed up and annoyed with this question, she pushed her own daughter into the river, which fatally killed Ji-yeon. Realizing what she had done, the mother instantaneously regretted. The mother, few years later, had another child, whom she called Ji-yeon to commemorate her former daughter. Ji-yeon also had a strange habit of asking her mother whether she was pretty, because the mother did not want to make the same mistake again. She remained patient and answered with, of course, honey, you're pretty. One day, the mother and Ji-yeon went on a walk in the forest. Ji-yeon stopped and asked her mother the same question she had always asked. Mommy, am I pretty? Of course, honey, you're very pretty. But Mommy, why did you push me into the river if you thought I was pretty? Thank you for always supporting the channel and welcoming its videos. Wishing you good health, and remember to subscribe to the channel to achieve 1,000 subscriptions.